Hello and welcome back to the Writer in White. I am the writer, I'm Caleb, and I'm so happy that you are here to join me again. Today we will be doing my November wrap-up. This is something that's new. I've had the idea to do this for a little while, missed the opportunity to do it in October, so we're going to do it here in November. We're going to try a couple different things tied into the wrap-up. We're going to look at my reading list, things that I read in the last month. We're going to look at my TBR, my to-be-read list, things upcoming that I'm really excited about, either books that I have or books that I'm ordering to be on that list sooner rather than others. We're going to look at things, a whole mess of things, and we'll see what sticks, what works, what doesn't. If there are things you guys are excited about, let me know, and I'll try to hit some of those as well. We're going to have a little bit of overlap in this one from content in October. There are some things that wrapped up kind of towards the end of the month or spilled over into November, and we're just going to see if that works. So some of it will be stuff that happened in October leading up to November. Again, because this is the first time doing this, we're going to see what works, what doesn't. So there will be a little overlap there, but for by and large, almost everything here will be from the month of November. So we're going to go books, we're going to go other pop culture media, do a little bit of touching down on NaNoWriMo, so the Nano challenge that happened in October, or happened in November, excuse me, and other content. So first up, the TBR list going into this month was much longer. Wasn't a ton of book titles, but they were hefty ones. So coming into this month saw me finishing up what very quickly became my favorite book series of 2021. So that is the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. So have the three books here. We have Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and Assassin's Quest. The first three books in Robin Hobb's in the three books of the Farseer trilogy, the first series in her larger expanded world, known as the Realm of the Elderlings. I've never read anything of Hobb's before. I heard her name spoken very highly in circles that also spoke highly of other authors that I loved their work. And so I knew that her work is respected, is loved. It's a very different style of fantasy being written in the 90s, so it doesn't have a lot of the same feel as some more contemporary fantasy that is just falls into some traps of needing to distinguish itself now when there are so many talented fantasy authors. I loved her books. The first one hooked me right away. I flew through the second one. I flew through the third, loved the series. My book reviews are now all live on my website and on Goodreads, so you can check those out. Highly recommend her work, especially this one is a great introduction to both her work and a larger series. And I'm definitely going to be checking out the rest of her work, looking at what stories expand beyond this first series that I loved so much. Surprising read from November. Actually, this would have been, early November, end of October. I picked up A Court of Thorns and Roses. And this one was kind of similar to Robin Hobb's. I had heard lots of great things about the author and her works, but I was hesitant because I know the intended audience of this is women, and I know that they love this book. I know they love the series. I know they love everything that Sarah J. Maas can put out. But I wanted to see if the hype transferred over. So me as a male reader, I picked it up. I wanted to give it a fair shot before I just said, this is just spicy fantasy for women to read and enjoy. And it has that. It is spicy. But it was also a very surprisingly good read. I enjoyed it. I will be picking up the next book and reading those. I will potentially be looking at other works by the same author. I enjoyed it both narratively, and I enjoyed it for the feel and the style of bringing in some elements of fairy tale and fairy magic, a lot of those themes that are tied to Irish and British Isles folklore. I love mythology and I love those types of feels, and when they're brought into fiction well, I really enjoy that. And so that was a huge thing for me to see in this book. I was hesitant early on. I had to suspend a little bit of disbelief to stay engaged, and I was worried that it was it wouldn't be as enjoyable to read. But by the end, I was proven wrong. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked the story. I think the characters were well written. I can see absolutely that the intended audience is for women, but me as a man and a male reader, I enjoyed it. I think it is a fine book, and I'm interested to see if the rest of the series continues that tradition and how the author grows. Another book in this this month's reading is The Great Hunt. So this is book 2 in the Wheel of Time series, second book by Robert Jordan. This book was brought largely back into focus with all the hype surrounding the Wheel of Time series on Prime. Read the first book, loved it, felt a little overwhelming in terms of it just being such a dense book. There is such a rich world that Robert Jordan created for the Wheel of Time. There's history, there's mythology, there's lore, there's the world, there's all the characters. I love the first book. But I had so many other books that I wanted to read. I had the Farseer trilogy, I had A Court of Thorns and Roses, I had, I believe at that time, I was also reading other books. I was reading the Cradle series during that time, getting through all of those books. So the Wheel of Time books kind of are going to be, and now after reading 2 of them, will be kind of interspersed throughout my reading. Do 1 or 2 at a time, take a break and read other works because there are so many books. There are 14 of them from what I remember correctly. Many that Jordan wrote and then that Sanderson picked up after Jordan's death before the culmination of the series. So yeah, I was really excited reading the first book. I was excited hearing about the show on Prime. And then when all the hype started up again for the show to be premiering, I remembered and I thought, this is great. I'm excited and I want more. So started on The Great Hunt, loving it. And the show's now on Prime. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So November had a kind of a comparatively shorter overall book count of things that I've read, even though I had arguably about the same amount of time as the previous months. But as you can see, these are the Farseer books. They're not short. Robert Jordan's books, not short. Even Court of Thorns and Roses being the shortest one of this month is 400 pages in this edition. So the books that I read were longer. So number of titles is definitely shorter, but I still got a lot of reading done. And some of the books that are upcoming share those traits. Books that are on my TBR for December, and longer depending on how busy the holidays get. First one is Dead Man in a Ditch. I'm very excited about this one. I loved the first one. This is a dark fantasy noir series written by Luke Arnold. He's an Australian actor, writer, screenwriter. And the first book, The Last Smile in Thunder City, was a huge divergence from traditional fantasy as I've read it. Brief synopsis, it's a world that is post-magic. So a magical world with magical creatures. Magic exists, it's established. It benefits almost everyone, and then in a cataclysmic event, magic vanishes. So the world is post-magic, and creatures, powers, magical machines, all those things now no longer have those magical abilities. So it's a post-magic world that used to have magic. The main character is a dark, troubled, gloomy private investigator, man for hire, and the author does such a good job of writing that character's narrative arc while at the same time telling us the history and lore of the world that he lives in. So there's not big exposition at the beginning that has to give you all his backstory, because understanding the world is a huge part of the series. But he does it interspersed. He does it through the lens of the main character. And it was so beautifully written. I love the book, and I'm so excited to get into the sequel. I've heard nothing but good things about it. I've loved everything that I've seen from Luke Arnold, and having loved the first one, I can't wait to get into this one. Next one, obviously, book 3 of The Wheel of Time. This is the third of the 3 that I currently own. Next ones will be coming probably later down the road in the future. This will probably be very quick on my TBR, because again, right now I'm loving The Wheel of Time and everything about it. But the next books in the series will most likely be put on ice to hold for a later time, while I kind of give other books and other authors, other works, their time in the spotlight. Other books that I have upcoming that are on their way. I have the next 2 books in a Court of Thorns and Roses series. Those are likely going to be shorter reads, especially comparatively. I think I read through the first book in 3 days or so. It's not a terribly dense read, so it's easy to pick up and just kind of burn through huge sections of it. So I have the next 2 books on the way. Again, it being a longer series, the later ones might take some time as I read through other books and other series in between. I also have the Earthsea cycle. I got a collector's edition that has all the books, all the short stories, and all the aspects from that. So that'll be my first introduction to Ursula Le Guin's work, who is by and large considered one of the foremost authors for both fantasy and science fiction. So Earthsea is her fantasy series. Wide acclaim. If you have been around fantasy, especially science fiction fantasy genre, beyond just the contemporary 2000s and newer, you've heard her name. She's one of the greats. And so this will be my first experience with her work firsthand. So I'm very excited about that. Dip my toes into the Earthsea cycle and then potentially branching out into her science fiction works as well. So that's by and large my TBR list for December. Not sure how much that I'll actually be able to get through because some of them are pretty hefty works, but we shall see how much progress I can make. At the end of October, Wizards of the Coast, we're pivoting now, just switching topics sharply. Wizards of the Coast released their Fizban's Treasure of Dragons. This was one of my most anticipated source books, or just books in general, from Wizards of the Coast for 2021. It was certainly not a disappointment. I think this book is a must-have for dungeon masters who are looking to make the most out of dragons, dragonkin, lore tied to the first world. It has a huge expansion there. This is a treatment that people have long thought that dragons deserved, especially with content such as Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and Volo's Guide to Monsters. Having certain races and creature types get their own dedicated sections with expanded lore, culture, history, traits, features, whether you're looking at layers as enemies. Fizban's does that for dragons, and it cranks it to 11. With stat blocks, maps for layers, whole breakdowns, including tables, spells, traits and features, flaws, ways to incorporate different dragons of different types into different sorts of campaigns. They don't have to just be enemies, and they don't have to just be these omnipotent, powerful creatures. They can be heads of guilds. They can be disguised working in mage academies. They can do all these different things. And Fizban's is a great way to not only get inspiration for that, but actually find solid concrete mechanics that have been play tested and balanced for 5th edition. I think the updates to existing content in there is great. Most of it is supplemental, but it has updates to the new races, or has new updates for existing races. So Dragonborn are now much more viable as a playable race, has 2 new subclasses, has new backgrounds or background features for bringing classes and subclasses under the purview of dragons as strong and powerful entities within the worlds of Forgotten Realms, or of Dungeons and Dragons in general, not just Forgotten Realms and not just Dragonlance. This book has lore and mythology tied within the idea of multiverses, that all the worlds exist simultaneously, not necessarily parallel, but ongoing at the same time. I won't get too much into that because that's a whole deep dive on its own, but I love this book. I think it's a great addition. I think for Dungeon Masters, it's a must-have, and one of the best recent books I've seen from Wizards of the Coast. And as November is now done, we are at the end of the National Novel Writing Month Challenge. NaNoWriMo 2021 is concluded. I saw lots of folks did really well. They got lots of progress. They wrote their 50K. They got their completion or their win. I had a really strong start. I was doing really well at the beginning. I was writing every day. I think my first day that I missed was almost 2 weeks in. I was really thankful for that. I had good habits, I had good practice, and I was doing really well. Probably towards the middle of the month, kind of right after the 2-week mark, I had a really tough week that impacted both my writing progress for Nano and just overall productivity. And those things happened, and I adapted as best I could, focused on what I needed to. But it set me back, and even though I got back into my writing process and habit towards the end of the month, I was just a little bit short. Towards the end of the month, I was about to crest the 40,000 word mark. My final tally, I believe, was right over 43,000 at the end. But some of that is, some of those words are notes, thoughts, shorthand within, and won't actually be words towards the final tally. I will be doing a wrap-up video for Nano, hopefully going up next week. So I will have exact numbers and breakdowns and further details about that. But unfortunately this year, again, fell short, did not complete the 50K, but I did much better than last year. I'm really proud of everything I accomplished. I'm really happy with everything I did, especially having not written much in a long time, and not having written much in terms of these stories. I haven't been in the habit of writing daily. I haven't been in the habit of tracking my progress, of finding consistent times to write throughout the week, or even multiple times throughout the day to hit my goals. So really proud of what I did. I learned a lot about how to improve and how to keep those habits and how to make those more sustainable. So once again, I am 0-2 for Nano challenges, but I learned a lot, learned more this year, learned a lot the first time, and hopefully next year we will be in an even better spot to hit the challenge and continue to make progress towards those works. But full recap and review of Nano 2021 will be going up soon, and hopefully by next week. So stay tuned for that. Regarding pop culture, storytelling, and other media, over the last month or so, there have been several that really stood out to me. First and foremost, the one that was probably the most grand, epic, I don't even know how to describe it succinctly, was Dune. I loved Dune. I know some people had critiques. I can't speak too much to critiques compared to the book or compared to the original film or the first film. I don't know if you can call any of them the original. But I haven't read the book. I didn't see the first film, but saw this one, loved it. Definitely agree that the movie is made for the big screen. It is grand, it is epic, it is a sweeping, masterfully told story, and I'm so excited now that there is a part 2 coming. I think the story deserves it. I think the actors deserve it. I think the director deserves to see his vision brought to fruition, and potentially a third movie as well, because the director said that he wants to do a third. Loved the movie, loved everything about it. I thought the cinematography was beautiful. I thought the actors did a phenomenal job. I loved the entire thing. Other things that came out recently. We are halfway through the Wheel of Time series on Prime. This last week was episode 4, so we are now halfway through the 8-episode run of Wheel of Time. Loving it so far, absolutely loving it. Loving it as someone who is relatively new to the Wheel of Time world, and loving it as someone who has read the first book. So I am aware of where the story is diverging from the book, where they are changing certain aspects, what liberties they are taking, how they are jumping or omitting certain points. And I have to say, I'm enjoying it so far. I think I understand most of the distinctions and the changes that they're making and why. Understanding why they're glossing over certain bits, why they're rewriting certain things to fit the medium, because you can't tell Jordan's entire story from book by book on the screen in that way, because there's too much there. So obviously they have to cut some things out, they have to do things differently, they have to change certain things, and so far I think they're doing a really good job. The themes are still there, the focus on the characters is paramount, and they're handling that so well, both in the preparation, the first couple episodes, to almost be harbingers for each of their journeys. So each of the main characters are getting their focus. We're seeing those hints for what their journeys are going to encompass. So their struggles, their challenges, their gifts, how those are going to develop. I'm very excited for all of those. So loving it so far. I think is being shot beautifully. I'm loving the soundtrack. The composer is has been one of my favorites, and I think their work on this is absolutely phenomenal. And again, halfway through, so we don't know how the season ends. I kind of have an idea of where they're probably going to wrap it up. I think it'll most likely follow the books pretty closely on where the seasons start and end, but I don't know. But optimistic and loving it so far. Another series that I think everyone has been loving, and I only just jumped on this train myself, is Arcane. Netflix, again, proven that they can take big IPs and transition them across media or across mediums and do it phenomenally well. I think this last week Arcane just crossed over the threshold of being the most watched series on Netflix this year, maybe ever, I'm not sure. Everyone's loving it. I'm loving it. I have just finished the second arc, so I have the second act. I have one more act to go, so 3 more episodes. And it's a beautiful show. I know nothing about League of Legends other than that I have some friends that play it. So my understanding of the world, the lore, the characters, all that was a blank slate. I didn't have any of the context for which characters were going to be enemies versus which ones have relationships, how different characters are related to one another, even how the world works. So blank slate for me, and I think I have to agree with the people that say that might actually be a better way to take in the show, because you don't have any of the extra context where you know, oh, these characters are friendly now. We know they end up as enemies later down the road. There wasn't any of that for me going in, but it's a beautiful show. The animation is gorgeous. The soundtrack is phenomenal. And it's just authentically human. The characters are just so real in the sense that they're showing emotion. They're showing a depth of the human spirit in so many different ways, and not shying away from difficult themes and not shying away from difficult topics, but they're not overindulging it. They're not wallowing in tropes or stereotypes for the sake of pandering or demonizing them, but they're also not using, but when they do use them, they're not using them flippantly. So everything has a purpose, and everything feels like it was done intentionally, both for the betterment of the story and for the proper arc for the characters to take. So I think it's really, really hopeful. They've already announced that they're doing a second season. I'm optimistic about that as well. I'm excited to see where the Arcane story goes, how much they diverge from established lore, however much lore there is in League of Legends. And so I'm excited to see what Riot allows them to do, how much more the voice actors can do, how much more the animation studio can do. Very excited for the future of that. And so with that, that is my November wrap-up. We covered books, both ones that I've read and things that I'm excited to read. Looking at TV shows, not only series, looking at movies and Dungeons and Dragons. December is coming up. We have a lot of stuff coming up in December. That wrap-up will probably be a little more dense, as we're looking at 2 series that are wrapping up, both Arcane and The Wheel of Time. Arcane because I was just late to jump on the bandwagon, and I don't know why I waited. It's phenomenal, and I can't wait to get my final thoughts on that. December will also see the premiere of Witcher Season 2, and a couple more Disney Plus shows are coming out. I haven't been on the Disney Plus train for a while, but I might get back in with some of these upcoming ones. Book of Boba Fett looks phenomenal. TBR list, hopefully making progress through that. Dungeons & Dragons has Strixhaven, a Curriculum of Chaos, coming out beginning of the month, which will be another really interesting entry for them back into the world of Magic the Gathering, bringing that crossover back to Dungeons & Dragons. So Strixhaven has a lot of optimism riding on it, but we'll see how that goes. Thank you guys for joining. Remember that you matter and your story is important, and it is up to you to decide how and when you decide to share it with the world. See you next time.